Joe Franco. All right. If a prep is damaging your relationships, that's just the price of taking bodybuilding seriously. Changed my mind.
Absolutely no. Now, I mean, I've been doing this for quite a while, so I've seen not only through my own relationships, how it can affect others. We all understand that bodybuilding can be a selfish sport, selfish activity, only because of the time that we have to dedicate towards it. But I feel there needs to be a balance and flexibility. And if it's affecting relationships, either a significant other or a family member, you really need to check yourself only because they're more important. They're going to be there for you after you compete. So why push anyone away during that time? And maybe the sport isn't just for you, or you're just not ready yet if you're going to be possibly damaging any type of relationships. Anecdotally, I mean, I've seen it. I mean, I can go on. You just pound the mic to tell me to stop, Josh. I've had clients in the past who have told me that, their husbands or wives are not supportive, and they ask me for advice. I said, "Well, I'm not there with you. I'm not a licensed psychologist, but I'm gonna tell you that maybe this is not the best timing for you because to have a proper prep, not everyone needs to be on board to give you full support, but if they are giving you negative feedback, disturbing your rhythm, or whatever else could be going on, it just may not be a good time." So I disagree with that. I fall in the camp of balance and flexibility, in and out of the gym, where to me, dedication and hardcore is just a consistency and a discipline within yourself. And you really shouldn't be affecting others around you. So that's how I land on that.
So, why do you think bodybuilding is such just an easy spurt to take to the extremes?
Why? Well, to the point is you have to be, well, I'm going to be honest with you. I think it's multi-leveled. And again, one of my philosophies is the hardcoreness is the discipline with yourself. And I do blame social media putting, a bad rap on it, only because every once in a while you'll see certain coaches, you see certain people, influencers who have a great prep, they have a great product, and it just so happens they promote what they did. So therefore, people then think, "Oh, that has to be the only way." John Smith did this. He locked himself in the room, brought Tupperware everywhere, wherever he went, everything, da 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 da, and he won his pro card. Well, that is like my life's mission to show people that that is not necessarily the case. Because the way that I talked about, and even on my own podcast, the only time you need to be selfish is that for 1 hour a day that you're weight training. That is your time, you know, and you're doing good for your body, you're setting your goal, you do your training, but the rest of the day, really your lifestyle shouldn't really change. Yes, you're eating a certain way, and I hate to oversimplify it, but you just might be eating less. That's it. Food is still just food where you shouldn't have to feel like, take yourself out of other, lifestyles and situations and whatnot. So my biggest belief is that balance and flexibility. I know I'm repeating it over and over again, but the drasticness of bodybuilding really shouldn't be there if you want to make it a lifestyle. If you have the what I call bodybuilding maturity and realize there are many ways of skinning the cat and learning what is best for you instead of like following blindly what someone may have done, which was a drastic approach. So it really is fingerprint dependent. Everyone's got different fingerprints. So therefore, you got to figure out what works best for you and not thinking that you've got to be 0 to 60 in 2 seconds or the all or nothing attitude that sometimes that you'll see. And
Mm.
I truly believe that. I have had a lot of successful clients, even myself learning the hard way, which a lot of times we have to learn the hard way first, if we want to continue doing this. And, the last time I competed a couple of years ago, lifestyle didn't change. It was just, again, more activity, less food, continue with the training, dealt with the hunger, but I still was attentive to my career, my family, my kids, my wife, and it's a mental state. It really is.
100% agree. So go into this sort of role play scenario with me. You're a first time competitor and they have a spouse who has never seen this before.
Yes.
What are the conversations that that competitor needs to have with their spouse or significant other?
See, that's tough because you don't know how the spouse or significant other is falling in line or meaning. And I hate to say it, it's usually not a secure relationship to begin with, where sometimes it could be insecurities where the spouse of the competitor could be having. It just doesn't have an understanding of the sport, whether if it's jealousy, like, "Oh, you're taking all this time away from me. Oh, you're gonna be half naked on stage." A lot of those things, sometimes it's good if you fall into this situation and you are not overly selfish as a competitor, maybe you should take the spouse to a contest to see what it's all about. And that's what I suggested to this particular woman because literally, she was telling me things that, well, he doesn't want to, da 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 da. Da. I mean, he's talking about divorce because I'm going to the gym more. And it's a dicey thing. And again, I'm not qualified or licensed to give that kind of advice, but that's the advice that I gave her, where maybe, we'll tone down your gym time a little bit. You have to meet halfway, maybe take him to a show. And unfortunately, she never made it to the show. And I think they had marital problems and it was just something that I wasn't able to handle. But there's been flip sides where I've had clients who were going through tough times, very similar to what we're talking about. And I actually told this one particular woman because she was a client of mine for years. We had a relationship and she had actually won her bikini pro card through the IFBB, right? Higher level competitor. She was drug free. She was a master's competitor and she wanted to do her first pro show. Well, again, her husband was super jealous. And this is where I was defending her a little bit because he had seen her climb the ladder. And I think he was purely jealous because all the attention that she was getting. Now, again, I'm not in their house, so I can't really see the dynamic of it. But again, I explained to her saying the same thing. Well, maybe it's time to peel back a little bit because the additional stress and anxiety that you're going through is not going to help you with your prep. Your body may not respond. But she basically went through it, didn't have the best prep only because of the extra cortisol kicking off and everything. And, they are actually fine as a couple, but she did end her bodybuilding career. So really, I mean, what I'm trying to get at, Josh, is that, yeah, again, everyone's a little bit different. I think first the competitor needs to be secure with themselves. I do believe you need certain amount of support. You don't have to be like your biggest cheerleader, but just to understand that this is a goal of mine. And a lot of times people that compete that have these goals, it's most likely they were a competitor at one point, high school, college, and they need this outlet and they choose to use weight training and they see how their body responds. And they're like, wow, how else can I take this? So they'll pick a contest, drug tested or not. But again, I think the biggest take home point is that you as a competitor you need to understand that it's just not about 0 to 60. It's small steps. It's taking your time, learning what's best for you so you don't have to do anything too drastic. Again, that's really my big philosophy with my coaching. It wasn't in the beginning, only because I've worked with so many people and my goal is for them to be happy. Where knowing that, yeah, this person that may compete, you know what, they may not win their pro card, but you know what? That's not their goal. Their goal is to go A to B, looking their all-time best, looking like they belong on stage, and to me, that's a win, and that's a win in their eyes. So they don't need to think about drastic or overly competitive or gotta beat people, and that's where my coaching philosophies have changed because I wanna hit a wide range of people that had this goal of competing, and that's something that you're gonna see in your shows. You know, as your shows grow, you're gonna have, like, all sorts of people. The one's hiding in the corner, with the hoodie on, doesn't talk to anyone. The young generation who's having a blast. And then the middle of the road people, not middle of the road competitors, but middle of the road, like, you know what? This is a good time. So it's promoting all the shows and coaching to probably thousands of people have really taught me that the lenses have gotten bigger and everyone deserves their fair shot. And I've learned overall that you could still look great, still win your pro card, still kick ass on stage without being drastic.
Excellent. So your coaching has evolved over the years. So hit these 3 points for me. Over the years, how has your approach to training, nutrition, and mentality evolved?
Training's always been the same. I have matured a little bit, and actually, I did a whole podcast on the topics. Obviously, training is still my muscle connection, proper form technique, pushing yourself with progressive overload, either through repetitions or weight. You have to do that. I don't care what level you're at. that is what you need to do to gain muscle tissue. So you have enough muscle tissue to look good on stage and then eventually burn fat to show it off. That has stayed the same. Although what's changed as far as weight training itself, I was old school. Like you got to squat, deadlift, da da da. You got to stick with the basics, which is true. And they are super productive. But through myself and injuries and working with a variety of people and body structures and all that, you learn that, you know what? It's okay to change paths if you need to pick a different exercise to target that muscle group. I would say over the last few years, 3 to 5 years, I backed off and I've adapted to that instead of saying, you got to follow my program to the T. They're like, well, no, Joe, I don't have that machine, or no, I have hip flexor issues and I can't do, deadlifts anymore. Back in the day, I'll be like, rub some dirt on it, but I've actually matured. I'm like, you know what? I get it, because I'm older, I have injuries. So that's changed, obviously, to help people adapt. Diet and nutrition, more of the same. Again, I was never about going drastic with the diet. It's all about learning what someone can handle caloric wise and then taking the calories down strategically so they maintain as much muscle as possible. Some things have changed as far as not calories or macros per se, but yeah, I used to be into school, thought you got to eat every 3 hours. You got to have, 1.5 to 2 times the amount of your body weight in protein. But, as you know, science and research has really come to life over the last 10 years or so, showing that debunking a lot of these myths about keeping your metabolism high by eating every few hours. You can't eat at night, or you have to have all this protein. Well, all of the science that has come out recently is actually making it, I think, easier and less stressful on us that you can compete, because people are like, Joe, I can only eat 3 times a day because of my work schedule. Well, back in the day, I'm like, can you get a snack in there? No. If you have 2 or 3 meals a day and you're within your caloric range of your working hours, it's still the same. So I believe all the research and the science that has been coming out is making it actually, I would say easier, because you still need the discipline, but you need to understand that, you can still reach your goals if instead of having to bro techniques. Because you gotta understand, I grew up watching the bodybuilders in the '80s and the '90s, and that's when I competed, and we had magazines. That was it. That was our source of information. There was no internet, but then the internet gets funky. And, we call it the bro world. And I was, into the bro world at one point because that's all we had. This was before I started working with clients. So my tactics when it comes to especially diet and nutrition is more acceptable. I think is more convenient for those who want to enter this world instead of thinking that they got to do the few things that I mentioned. If you want to eat at night because you have to, it helps you go to sleep and you're within your caloric range, have at it. That's not going to slow anyone down. Fasted cardio, no, that's not any more beneficial than fed cardio. But things like that have evolved, and back then, 15, 20 years ago, I was like, yep, yep, yep. But I'm like, no, you loosen up. You mature with age and you rely on some research, not only through clients, but through yourself.
You had mentioned social media, and I always like to touch on this because I see some definite pros and cons there. In your coaching, what do you see as the main benefits and drawbacks of social media now?
Drawbacks. We got do a whole other podcast on that. Think the biggest drawback, the one that sticks out the most, is that if you're a new competitor or someone that's interested in competing, and you're following other people, you gotta realize that you're watching their highlight reel. You're not seeing their real life, the behind the scenes. They're only coming out showing stuff, maybe how great they look, maybe 2 or 3 weeks out of the year around their contests, and they're reposting content thinking that's how they always look. It's not real. That's problem number 1. Problem number 2, self-comparing and, going against the whole philosophy of mine, you versus you, it's self-improvement, where people will be like, "Well, you know what, Joe? Why am I not looking like her? I've been weight training for 2 years and da 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 da." I said, "Well, first of all, you don't know how long this woman's been weight training. You don't, she could have better genetics than you. I hate to say it. Maybe they are on PEDs. You have no idea. So there's a lot of stuff that the person doesn't see besides, the pictures or the reels of someone competing or their journey. So really the comparison end of it, seeing someone's highlight reel, those two things stick out most to me. I mean, some people will say, well, listen, Joe, they motivate me. Hey, if you can take that approach and you see such and such and that can motivate you, that's great. But you got to understand that you can never compare yourself because I always use the analogy we have different fingerprints. And to me, that's the hard thing. And it becomes like a drug. I think it's also too time consuming for many people, no matter what age you are, where it could take away from other things in your life. And you're thinking that this is the only way. So, I mean, again, the pluses of it. Yeah, possible motivation, maybe if you need to learn different exercises, if you don't have a coach, food ideas. I think that's pretty cool out there instead of like Googling or using AI or playing around. Other than that, it is what it is.
Well, I definitely see that the drawbacks are there. Just the emotional distress from the social comparison that you were mentioning, like that to me is almost enough to just stay off of it for the most part, outside of things you need to do for business and things like that. But that's
Correct, correct. I mean, again, being on both sides of the coin, being a bodybuilder and a coach before social media, it's definitely different. There are a lot of coaches that I respect, but there are ones that solely become like Instagram coaches. And I don't mean to knock on anyone. I mean, they can have great success, but it gets scary because someone who's been on both sides of the coin, we realize now as a coach, you do need to put yourself out there. And I was just having this conversation with one of my long-term clients. He's like, it's so awkward, coming up with content, trying to be real, trying to be phony, and actually, promoting shows now. It's part of the gist to get your name out there, especially, starting off with a 1 year, second year show. It's an unnecessary evil, but I think you can handle it tactfully, respectfully, and do it the right way. And then the good people are going to find you. I think that's what it comes down to. The people that are not looking for the quick fixes, as far as hiring me, the people that want a positive bodybuilding show instead of like whatever clown show that you may come across on some of these organizations. So really what you put out is what you get. And I think that's one of the benefits, but it's also a challenge, for coaches starting out, trying to be real instead of just trying to be trendy.
so, I mean, that is definitely an issue, and you bring up the issue of quick fixes.
Yeah.
I think some athletes come in and their just expectation for the timeline of preparing for a show is just wildly skewed. Can you talk a little bit about what that conversation is like when an athlete's like, "Hey, I'm ready to compete in 10 weeks," and you have a difference of opinion?
Absolutely. No, that's a great question. And to be honest with you, I probably lost more clients by being honest, only saying like, just to say John came to me, right? And he's been weight training for less than a year. And I'd be like, listen, John, you could step on stage, but ultimately I want the best for you and you for to have a great experience. Now you have to understand you're not going to have the same muscle tissue as someone who's been weight training 5 years or greater. Or if this person is really overweight and they just simply need more time and they think to be drastic. So it is a difficult conversation where I'm not the type that I'll be like, all right, John, I could put you on stage in 3 months. I'm going to throw the kitchen sink at you. Let's see what happens. Yeah, I can be that coach. But ultimately, my goal is that person to have such a great experience. So they want to do it again. Give them the opportunity to be like, you know what? I did look the best that I could have in this short amount of time, but I want to continue to see how much further I can go. And I think that is one of the big issues that I see with sometimes coaches taking on clients or these clients that are so rushed to compete that they'll do anything. They'll put more harm on their body. They'll be more drastic. And then they'll be like, screw this. I never want to do this again because it was just too hard. Now, yeah, it is hard. And I call it the suck zone, usually the last month leading to a competition. But if you're feeling the suck zone as soon as you start, you're mentally not prepared, physically not prepared. So I like to have at least 6 to 8 months with someone, at least. Now, more is better, And it really depends on how much muscle tissue or how much body fat they have to lose. Now, there could be some pros that will come to me that I work with on and off over the years, and they come back. Yeah, 6 months, 5 months, only because I have data on them already. They're attuned with their body. They didn't blow up. Yeah, we can nail it. But a total beginner, usually I like to get a couple years of weight training under their belt, even say, listen, you know what? If you want to go on your own and come back, more than happy to take you on. Or if you want to work with me full year, so we can really dedicate the time to building your body the proper way, learn what your caloric ceiling is. So therefore we can diet off a higher caloric intake. Because again, Josh, I mean, a big problem is that some people will come to me and I get an idea how many calories they're taking in, and they're already super low and they're still carrying body fat. So they could have some metabolic adaptations, if that's a real thing, where their body is slowed down and we need to correct that first instead of using a contest prep to correct it. So yeah, it's always a difficult conversation, but my goal again, no matter how old you are, how many years you've been weight training, is for you to have a good time. Yeah, you want to kick ass on stage, but it is you versus you. And I want you to have that opportunity after you compete to be like, you know what? I want to do this again. Or, you know what? I checked it off my life box. I had a great time and I don't want to do it again. Either's fine. Instead of being like sucked from day one, because you don't want to look back and have regret, because sometimes people that will do these shows, they'll regret, like, you know what? I could have used too much more months of dieting, or I could have been weight training a little bit longer. Again, that's one of my main philosophies, the longevity of the sport and making it a lifestyle.
Natural bodybuilding is about longevity.
Yes.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's because yeah, it's true. It's funny. Like I have these conversations with some of these women clients that I have a ton of potential. And, they're in their mid to late 20s and they've been weight training 5 or 8 years, since high school. And they'll be like, Joe, am I going to be over the hill soon? And I'm like, no, I mean, you look at most top women natural pros, they're well into the 30s. Or crossing over at 40. And that's just because of muscle maturity. It's because they've been weight training for 20 years and they built up the physique to their potential. Some people, yeah, some people are just genetically gifted. I get it. They can weight train for 2 or 3 years. They can go on eating dirt and water diet and gain muscle. It is what it is. But the majority of us in the middle, you need that time to build the body. And I do believe in muscle maturity. And that just comes with time, skin naturally thinning out, all those little things. And usually when someone reaches that point, they also have what I call bodybuilding maturity. You know,
Mm.
they don't do the drastic stuff. They live their lifestyle, revisiting what we talked about a few minutes ago. When you put that time in, you learn more about yourself instead of doing the all or nothing attitude.
So you mentioned, like, the hardcore thing, the truly hardcore thing is consistency.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
not these drastic measures that people take.
yeah.
What are some of the drastic things that you see during a prep and, let's say, during peak week that you wish just athletes would stop doing altogether?
Water reduction, depleting water, I still hear that. That is number one. Doing crazy peak weeks, especially when most people just aren't ready, thinking they're going to deplete, using, illegal diuretics like dandelion root, especially when they're overweight. Hours of cardio still going into the show, not letting the body recover. I mean, even in the hallways at my show, I walk up and down, I do my rounds, I just talk to people, and you hear like, oh, I'm so thirsty. I haven't had, my coach had me cut my water in half, and I only had sips on the day before. And I'm like, oh my God, what are these kids doing? I mean, that's old school bro stuff. But again, the science, Josh, as we talked about, more water in, more water out. You fill up your muscles with water, sodium, and carbs, which actually make things easier. But obviously, as you know, you got to be super lean for these things to happen. But yeah, those things I still hear, or if I have clients, all over the country that compete, people will come up to them and be questioning, oh my God, why are you eating so much in the morning? Why are you, snacking on Skittles and drinking down water? Aren't you afraid you're going to spill over? I'm like, no, he's not going to spill over. That's, unless you're having 3 pizzas, you're not going to spill over. So really what I'm getting at, still the drasticness is still there. And that to me is the most upsetting part because thinking that, peak week is gonna change or these crazy tactics are gonna change, but they're also dangerous. You roll the dice, which is really not necessary because again, if one athlete it's to their full potential, and if they're ready, usually my goal for my athletes, especially the higher level ones, are really in tune. You're going to be ready a couple weeks out, and it's just coasting in. It's about recovery, backing off, listening to your body, filling out, almost like a reverse diet going into the show. And you feel much better than you did during the suck zone.
And I'm sure that if you have pros or athletes who compete in multiple shows, feeding into their first show, if they continue to lean out through that, they'll probably feed in a little bit more. And so
Absolutely. Yeah,
this feeding in
that's the
process.
benefit of it, yeah. When we do a couple shows within a 3, 4-week period, you just gather more data, you learn what's best for them, and it becomes easier, and actually cortisol levels fall only because they're more relaxed, and they're actually eating more, and they're not doing as much cardio because they got to their condition level. Now it's just about filling out a little bit in a strategic way. That's the fun part about it. If one can reach that level, it becomes easier for me. My job is not just to mess them up.
You're right. In one of your podcasts, I think you suggested that the word diet should make people nervous. Could you
Oh,
talk a
okay.
little bit about that?
Well, yeah, because again, diet is just a way that we eat, right? I mean, it's back, elementary school, we learned about diets. Basically, diet is just what you take in consumption wise, calorie wise, where we shouldn't be labeling the way that you eat. Uh, again, only because what we talked about before, people are trying to label certain diets just so they have a niche, keto to whatever, whatever. There's so many crazy things out there, which, yeah, it could work for you. But my ultimate goal is not to be looking at food as a way of dieting, but looking at food as way of promoting muscle growth. Reducing food calorie wise, if you want to lose body fat, I try to simplify it as much instead of giving you such a label and thinking that you need to follow this way or if it's not going to work if you don't. That again is the whole mindset. And it's really tough because we've been inundated for 50 years or whatever with diet books and shows and infomercials and now influencers, social media. And we've pound and pound with all this information. But I did a whole podcast, and you might be referring to it, if you can look at food as just food, yeah, food is there for celebrations. I get it for holidays. But if you just look at food as just food, as fuel, it can take the burden off of your shoulders. It's thinking, no, this is just the way that I'm eating. It's not a diet. It's just what I'm eating in this time period of my life because I want to gain muscle. This is just the way that I'm eating because I want to shed some body fat. That's it. Yeah, it's again, I try to really simplify things, but also to make it more connectable to people who stress out over these factors, which is very common, especially in the bodybuilding world. Always chasing for something else, that shiny string. Like, maybe if I switch my oats to white rice, I can do this instead. Or no, you're overcomplicating it. Food is just food. It's just the way that you're eating. Don't look at it as a diet. Look at it as a phase to where you want to go at this particular time.
Mm. Another scary thing that has to do with dieting. I think you mentioned one of your recent podcasts. Well, one of them that I got a chance to listen to was intuitive eating.
Yes.
Could you talk to me about the role of intuitive eating? And I think you even mentioned intuitive eating during a prep, which I feel like would frighten most
Yeah,
competitors.
that's a skill. Intuitive eating simply means, and I think you need to that's great. No, I could talk about this one for a long time, Josh. Now, intuitive eating is a skill that you want to reach eventually. Now, I think you need to go through the period of being disciplined through a diet first. Okay. Meaning that you're tracking somehow, whether it's macros, whether if it's even following a meal plan, whether it's calories, whatever, you need that discipline of tracking first. But then the skill of intuitive eating simply means that if we want to keep that balance and flexibility, and we are going out on a dinner with our wives for an anniversary, and we're not within striking distance of our show or in a hard fat loss phase, we can go out and look at foods and eye things up because you did so many reps on what your normal dinners are you could sway away from that just a little bit. You know what? Usually at home, I'm eating chicken, broccoli, and rice. But instead, when I go out, I'm gonna have steak and a potato, maybe not as much, butter on it, but you intuitively eat. So it's a skill. Now, I think years of counting macros doesn't have to be years straight, seasonally. If you're competing, you can get better at intuitive eating, meaning that you don't need to carry a food scale around from you with you all the time. Now, truth of the matter, and here's a little secret. When I did my last prep, we did a lot of traveling because my wife tanning shows, we helped out some bodybuilding shows down south. And I was about a month out. No, it was about 5 weeks out, and 3 weekends we were away. I was intuitively eating during those weekends, and I was 5 weeks out from my show, where I just because of reps of, like, knowing what I usually eat, I bought bags of beef jerky, rice cakes, some other things, turkey lunch meat, slices of bread, and just because of the reps of doing it for so long, this 4 or 5 months of my prep, I felt confident and actually reduced the stress. Yeah, maybe I underate a little bit, but I didn't count anything for those few days every time we traveled, and it didn't hurt me. But again, I reached a level of being able to look at things and figure things out for my own body. But I think it's a great skill, especially those who are just starting out, where, if they're not within striking distance of a show and they do have a mini vacation, I would tell them, listen, eye things up. Try to intuitively eat. So therefore you don't have the extra pressure on yourself where you can learn to do this because ultimately you want to be able to intuitively eat and not rely on a food scale. That shouldn't be there as a babysitter when you're done bodybuilding or coming off of your show. Now, I get it. I got clients that will count year round and it makes them
Mm.
feel comfortable. It doesn't cause any stress or any anxiety. But if the counting causes anxiety, learning how to intuitively eat, eyeing foods up, laying loose, not making it an excuse for a blowout, I think becomes a very useful skill in the bodybuilding lifestyle. Some people can do it, some people can't. But I think it's always worth a shot of learning how to.
There's another layer to this to me. I think what you've been discussing is a lot of eyeing and intuitively knowing what
Yes.
are the right foods, what are the right portion sizes, and things like that. But the layer below that that I want to touch on a little bit is how do you help people intuitively know what their hunger and fullness signals are? Do you ever talk about that at all?
A little bit, little bit. I feel the one cue that I've used for people, they're like, "Oh, Joe, I'm going on vacation. How do I really know? I'm not comfortable, not." I said, "Well, the biggest piece of advice that I give to someone is that if you reach a point eating one meal and you feel like you're eating so much you're not going to be hungry in a few hours, you're eating too much."
Mm.
You got that? So, if you're going out and basically it's a buffet breakfast, and obviously, normally understand what your breakfast is, yeah, at home. But then there's that bacon section. You wanna have a few slices of bacon. I'm like, "Have at it." But don't get to the point that when you think and walk away from that table, well, it'll be too late. But you don't wanna reach the point that, like, you walk away feeling, I can't eat for the rest of the day. To me, that is the overload. So you want to be able to intuitively eat, enjoy it, but not to the point that it's going to be what I call a blowout, or it could possibly interfere if you wanting to eat another 3, 4, 5 hours. So that is one of the cues that I've been practicing and giving people so they can build up, a better relationship of food. Because, a lot of times you go out to dinner, you're like, "Oh my god, it's a free for all. I'll have this left side of the menu." No, it's still personal responsibility. And the other factor that I'll bring up, Josh, is that I want clients not to feel guilty about the way that they eat. And thinking like, "You know what? I blew out. Ugh, how am I gonna feel the next day?" Before you get to that meal of thinking that you might blow out, you've gotta remind yourself, "I wanna enjoy this meal, but I'm not gonna feel guilty tomorrow." And I think that is the positive relationship that one can acquire. It's really gonna benefit them. Now, there are people that, "Yeah, I want me blow out. I don't give a shit tomorrow anyway." Alright, that's fine. But you get those who feel guilty and they feel like they need to compensate. Oh, I got to eat less now. I got to do extra cardio. No, I think that's also a negative spot. So the two tools is listening to your body so you just don't eat too much that you don't think you can eat your next meal, and also the whole guilty part of it, being comfortable with what your decision is.
I think that's something that you don't know going into bodybuilding, but those feelings of guilt,
Yeah.
those will come up, especially when you start working with a coach and you have a plan and you have check-ins and things like that. So I'm wondering, I think from one of your podcasts, you had mentioned sometimes clients email you like, "I've ruined everything." So what do you do when you get that email? Like, "I tanked on my diet. I think I'm up 3 pounds. I don't know what to do from here."
Well, one of the most important things that I'll do is just remind them it's a small blip in time. If I'll zoom out and then we'll look at their information, basically, not just in the immediate 2 or 3 days or even a week's period of time of their report. We'll zoom out and I'll simply remind them, you know what, Josh, over the last 3 months, you're progressing, you're losing a 0.5% of body weight each week. The past week, you didn't. It's up a 0.5%. But when you zoom out, look at the big trend of the picture, you're making good progress. And I'll sometimes also remind them, sometimes things happen for a reason, where this could be a learning lesson that maybe your body needed the extra food. Who knows? Don't beat yourself up over it, because the more you beat yourself up over it, the more guilty you're going to feel. It might be even harder to get back on track. Put it behind you. It's a life lesson and we'll move forward. I rarely will do compensation type stuff. I just want people to get back on track. And then when they show me they're back on track, everything's cool. And if necessary, then we'll push, because I want to reestablish the baseline, because the baseline could have been working. So really zooming out, looking at the total amount of work that they've been doing, and most of the times, hopefully it is positive. We'll focus on that rather than just like try to dissect, make them feel guilty, let them know, oh, you screwed up. No, you just back off a little bit. It's okay. Maybe this had to happen to get it out of your system, or maybe for whatever reason.
That's such a beautiful metaphor, sort of zooming out, because when we mess up, it gets so myopic and we get so zoomed in on that one point in time.
Micromanage. And again, that's another drastic thing a lot of us bodybuilders do. I've been there. I kind of still do it. It's just you micromanage. But in the big picture, I think if you can learn to relax a little bit and not micromanage, learn how to intuitively eat, learn how to back off a little bit, zoom out, I think you can have just a successful prep, because cortisol and stress levels are down. Now, don't get me wrong. I have clients that, excuse my French, will go balls to the wall. They stick to it. They push tunnel vision and they can have great success. But what I try to promote and teach is that there are people that are interested in bodybuilding. Maybe they can't put the blinders on, and it's okay to change lanes, to try different things, especially what we were just talking about.
I wanna zoom out on your career. You said you were, in the '80s, you drew your bodybuilding inspirations from there. I'm curious, the '70s, the '80s, the '60s, era of, PED use and things like that. What is the motivating factor for Joe Franco to stay drug-free?
That's a good question. And actually, I would thank the OCB for that. Where when I first started competing, I looked for drug tested shows, because actually my brother was doing them through the AAU back in the day. Actually, they were drug tested. I found an organization in the 1990s, in my early 20s to late 20s, that I competed in, had a lot of success. And then they folded, right? So therefore, I still wanted to compete, got married, starting a family. And I thought of possibly, you know what? I could do NPC shows. I'm an okay bodybuilder. Do I have to use drugs? And I was like, yeah, is weighing it out. I'll be honest with you. But then I discovered the OCB, right? And it was a friend of mine, a client of mine, who competed in literally one of the first shows back in 2003 or four. Literally, just like when there were just a couple of shows in the Mid Atlantic area that Matt Shepley was holding. I was like, oh, what's this? Drug tested organization. I learned more about it. And I made my comeback after a 5 or 6 year layoff doing a show in 2005. And then that was it. And the reason why I've stuck with them, but not only that, why I didn't want to use steroids is because it still gives me a ladder to climb, you know, meaning that, oh, I can win my pro card. Oh, I can compete in a pro show. Oh, I can compete in a pro show and then win money. So that was motivating enough for me to be drug free. Now, it wasn't like I ever thought about becoming an IFBB pro or whatnot. I didn't have any goals of that because yeah, during that time, the drug usage was really ridiculous to compare to the guys in the 80s. I didn't even think about them using steroids. I just thought they looked great, back, like the early 80s. PED usage was there, but not to the extent it is now. So I always thought it as an option, like, oh, if I want to compete in the NPC at that time, maybe I need to do this. But then, it wasn't like a tough decision not to wanting to do it, only because I was like, I was weighing it out, but then when I discovered the OCB, it was like, this is the direction that I want to go in. Everything happens for a reason. And even to this point, there's no interest of doing steroids. I mean, I have a few clients that will dabble and whatnot. I mean, I'm a freedom of choice, but I always believe, and I try to talk, to some of the younger athletes who ask me questions. I said, listen, I think you should go as far as possible as a natural, put all the years in. See if you can make the pro stage at the OCB. See if you can even start winning prize money. And then at that point, if you actually want to do it, have at it. And not one have I ever, I've had people, young athletes who made it to the pro stage. Not one of them has ever decided to use steroids. Only because you give them the guidance that you can still climb the ladder. I know this was question, it was about me, but it relates to actually what I've learned over the years and wanting to teach the young physique athlete that there is a path of getting known. There is a path of climbing, of prestige, with the OCB. So achieve that first before you want to dabble with PED usage. But again, like I said, freedom of choice. You want to do what you want to do as long as you know what you're getting into. I would never stop anyone. But for myself, it was just that short period of time where I didn't know where I wanted to compete that, when I discovered the OCB, it gave me that direction and like never looked back.
I think I definitely agree in that I'm a big autonomy guy. You have the freedom to choose. And if you're choosing other federations, just make sure that you're abiding by whatever the federation's rules are.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to be in the OCB, I abide by that, WADA standards, so on and so forth. But I think, giving young people a thing to strive for is
Yes.
something that is so important. And I'm curious, you said you had the OCB to thank, but I want to dig in. Is there anybody along your path, any one individual that you're grateful for having encountered that sort of helped you along your bodybuilding career and or journey?
Well, I would say initially, I always say my brother was the first one where he introduced me to the weights in the gym. He competed. I looked up to him. So obviously he's number one, meaning, he set me in the direction. After that, honestly, I can't think of anyone. I mean, I've always been self-driven, self-competitive, where, I've had some talks with other coaches throughout the years, but honestly, yeah, I'm not trying to be selfish. I've always been self-driven, still to this day, even with my injuries and getting older and over the hill, I still do because I love it. The passion is there. That's the bodybuilding end of it. Obviously, I gotta give thanks and all my props to my mentor in the bodybuilding world of promoting that, which is Matt Shepley. I mean, he took me under his wing. He came to all my shows, helped me out. I had no clue what I was doing back in the day. Learned from the best, and I still modify and mentor. I mean, I still like model my shows after what I learned working all his shows and him attending mine. So yeah, my success as a promoter, it goes to all to him. As far as bodybuilding and just the competitiveness, yes, I was a college athlete where always trying to do my best, stay within myself, and that's really what it is. I watch certain pro bodybuilders, but it's like, whatever, I believe that about the inner peace of wanting to be the best that I can be, where I don't need outside sources, if that makes sense in your psychology head or not.
You embody the you versus you mentality.
Yes, that's it.
And as long as there is you to compare yourself to. You have something to achieve.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. That
Oh,
makes sense. Yeah.
yeah. What a lovely sound. Joe, I've had a fantastic time talking with you. Where can people go if they want to contact you for your coaching services or sign up for one of your shows?
To sign up for my shows, you just visit the OCB website, search the shows. I promote 3 a year. The Jersey National Open, which is in May, the Battle for the Belt, which is in August. Both are in Burlington, New Jersey. And my third show, which is the Franco Classic, happens in November in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Your best way to reach out to me is email me, fitfranco@verizon.net. That's the best contact. I have the socials, Joe Franco, teamfrancobodybuilding.com, which is my website, but I don't think people do websites anymore. But yeah, email is the best way. Hit me up on the socials, and I love talking to new people. Or if you are an experienced person, you have questions. Yeah, there's no obligation ever to talk to me. I try not to push anyone. I love to listen to people, give them my advice, and then the conversation moves on to coaching. I always love the opportunity to work with, those who have that interest that I do and the willingness to work hard.
That's fantastic. Let's just get around people who have the same interest as us.
That's it. Bottom line, man.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. Really appreciate it.
You bet. My pleasure. Thank you.